Rob, I guess as of Director of Sustainability and Climate Change at LDA, what is it that you do with LDA Design, and what sort of interesting projects have you been working on recently, and talk to me a bit about all the sort of work that you're doing.
Sure. I've got two main roles. One is leading our solar energy work. So I lead a team of planners, designers, graphic specialists, landscape visual specialist ecologists to develop and guide solar projects through the planning process. We can also help some of our clients to find suitable sites, appraise them in the first instance, and then, as I say, to guide those through the planning process to a successful consent, and to then help them to implement them as they need them. We've worked on now around 400 megawatts of consented solar, of which about 100 of that is now operational in different parts of the country. And that ranges from a few megawatts, some very small schemes, through to some of the very largest and more challenging in the country. So one of our schemes is a very large scheme around 50 megawatts in South Cambridgeshire called Vine Farm. That'll be built this year under the ROC grace period, so should be under 1.3 ROCs. We've also been working with a company called REG Solar Power and Veolia, a landfill operator, and we've been developing a number of schemes on former landfill sites. One of those got consent in the Greenbelt in the east of London, in Thurrock, and we've got consent with them for another couple of schemes. One of them, Netley, was one of the schemes that got its contract for difference last week. And then we've worked on a large number of greenfield schemes in different states of challenge and difficulty, some easier than others. So that side of our work is still a very large part of what we do, and we're expecting that, despite the uncertainties that we're all operating in as a solar industry, we're still seeing a fairly healthy pipeline of schemes that are now 5 megawatts and below, so still within the ROC or the FIT regime, through to those that are either going to go into the next CFD auction, or may even be longer term prospects that might get built without subsidies, depending on how quickly the cost of solar drops. So that planning and consenting side, the development promotion side, has been the biggest part of our work to date. But increasingly we're looking beyond the type of projects that we've been looking at until now. I also lead an area of work that we've entitled LDA Futures, which is just about looking at where as the name suggests, where the future of energy is going. But not just energy, the future of infrastructure, the future of housing, commercial development, and so on. So it's really about taking a look at some of the big global drivers of change, so climate change, the shift away from centralised to decentralised, increasingly low carbon energy, demographic change, the need for new housing, and the need for the renewal of infrastructure that follows from those big drivers of change. One of the things that we're very clear on is that the way that we have approached development and the provision of infrastructure and the types of infrastructure that we provided until now are going to be very different looking into the not too distant future. So what I think is clear is that the days of thinking about infrastructure as something that is isolated from everything else around it, be that energy infrastructure, transport infrastructure, housing. So the days of being able to provide those pieces of infrastructure without giving too much regard to everything that's going on around it are numbered. And that requires us and allows us to think about how we use land, how we use landscapes, how we develop in very different ways. So thinking about solar as a prime example of this, we as an industry have got used to building a solar farm here. We'll find a place that's got a suitable grid infrastructure, capacity on that piece of grid infrastructure. We'll build our solar farm, we'll connect to the grid, and we'll sell our electricity at pretty low prices, wholesale prices. Now I think all of us know that there are inherent challenges with that, not least that the grid is in many places at or beyond capacity, which places big constraints on developers and their ability to find sites. We also know that the days of subsidies are numbered. We don't know how numbered, over what timescale, but the industry has become very used to responding to the government's latest change in subsidy regimes. And I think we can only expect that that's going to continue into the future. So to resolve these challenges, we need to think creatively, we need to think differently. And to do that, we need to think about ways to move beyond subsidies. We need to think about how we can raise the value of the electricity that we sell. And we need to think about ways that we can provide services to the grid rather than simply finding a point at which the grid can accept our electricity. And to do those things, we need to think much more broadly. So it goes back to this idea that we can't think about a piece of infrastructure in isolation. So we need to think about that piece of energy infrastructure together with a piece of, we need to think about that piece of energy infrastructure together with maybe housing, commercial developments, or battery storage. And by thinking different, by thinking about these things together, by bringing them together into the same problem, we stand a much better chance of resolving these multiple challenges. And I think that presents us with a phenomenally exciting period of our history to come, as it were. So we're beginning to work with a number of clients to help them think through some of these issues. And in terms of planning, that way of thinking means that we need to think differently about where we build, how we build, who the partners in that process are. So are we thinking about closer relationships between the public and the private sectors, because the public have much more control over land through the planning process. They also own land. They also have more control over where development happens, so where growth on the edge of a town or a city happens. And the role that energy plays within that will be dictated by those different decisions and those different players.
Are you seeing a readiness to look and make those decisions and I guess take a more holistic view at a project rather than seeing it as close to a grid, will enable cheaper electricity, etc.? Is it something that's shared with the people that you're working with?
I think the answer to that is yes in some cases, and it's early days in other cases. Just to be clear, what I'm not saying is that there will be no solar farms in the way that we've become used to them. They'll still exist, and they may still exist a number of years down the line. But the world is changing, and that presents opportunities for those developers that wish to be more creative, to respond in ways that are much more interesting, much more exciting. So I think at the moment there is room for both. There will be both, and that will remain so for a period of time. And you could also see a scenario where if a new development is by virtue of the fact that you've got an end user for your energy, the development side, you've got your energy generation, you've got storage, and you've got the wires and the communication technologies that connect those. You can actually foresee a scenario where that development as a whole is providing services to the grid that allow that grid to operate more effectively, that piece of grid, that might actually open up opportunities, more standard developments in relatively close proximity. So I think there is a challenge out there for the development community. There's a challenge out there for the public sector and for communities, because what is very clear from all of this is that it will change many of our relationships with energy, because energy will be closer to all of us. At the moment, a lot of our solar farms are some way out in the middle of nowhere, and people don't see them, or they don't want to see them, or they say they don't want to see them, or we think they don't want to see them, and we'll hide them away. Actually, what we might be seeing here is solar or other renewables coming right up close to existing or new communities. So that relationship between us as householders, generators, suppliers, users, developers, and so on, it's all starting to get mixed up. And that presents some really big challenges to decision makers, to planners, to us as an industry. So I think there is a very exciting and a very challenging time ahead of us to resolve some of these tensions and contradictions and uncertainties.
How would you see something like the quite recent CFD results that came out last week? Do you take those results as another step on the way towards grid parity and a post-subsidy solar industry here in the UK? How do you view those?
I think it has to be both, actually. I think the biggest disappointment for me is just how little solar has come through the CFD auction. You know, it's a technology that has proved itself to be incredibly deployable. The speed of deployment from start to finish is unlike anything else. The cost we know can expect to continue to drop. So I think it's a real shame that the budget there was not bigger to allow more to come through. Whether the auction itself worked well or not, I'm not the right person to comment on that. I suspect, looking at what came through the auction for this year and what's come through for the next few years, probably not. I would love to say, isn't it fantastic that two schemes came in at £50 a megawatt hour. It just shows, you know, that solar is here. I think it's a bit more complicated than that. So I'd love to be able to say that, but we can't, because you know, I think those schemes will really struggle. Whether it works at the 79, 82 for the preceding years remains to be seen.